Caleb Duran, Miles Carter, and Victor Hale, three names that turned Liverpool's underworld into ashes. When this ruthless American trio landed on British soil, they didn't come to make peace. They came for revenge, calculated, cold, and unstoppable. What began as a quiet arrival at the docks soon erupted into an inferno of betrayal, blood, and power. By the time the smoke cleared, Liverpool was burning, and the streets had learned a deadly lesson. When the American crew comes for payback, no one walks away untouched. Please subscribe for daily new update of GAN crime story and watch till end. When the sun dipped behind the Mersey River, Liverpool transformed into a city of half-lit streets and unspoken rules. The docks carried the smell of salt and oil, but beneath that was something darker, the tension that always came before chaos. The night the American crew arrived, nobody knew their names, but everyone felt the shift. It started quietly. A line of black SUVs moved through the narrow streets near the waterfront, their windows tinted, their engines humming low like predators waiting for the right moment. Within hours, the whispers began. Foreign men had been seen meeting local fixers. Money was changing hands. The city's oldest gangsters were suddenly nervous, their grip on power slipping without a sound being made. Caleb Duran stepped out of that first car, like a man who had already seen the end of the story. Tall, sharply dressed, and cold-eyed, he carried himself with the calm of someone who didn't need to shout to be obeyed. He was the kind of man who built empires in silence. With him were two trusted men, Miles Carter, his planner and strategist, and Victor Hale, the enforcer whose presence alone could freeze a room. Together they formed a triangle of fear and intelligence that had dismantled bigger cities than Liverpool. They had crossed the Atlantic not to fame or reputation, but for revenge. Months earlier, a shipment worth millions had gone missing cocaine, and cash rooted through the Liverpool docks, part of an arrangement between Caleb's Miami boss and local kingpin Reggie Doyle. But Reggie had double-crossed them. He'd stolen everything, claimed the Americans had disappeared, and silenced anyone who questioned it. That betrayal was the kind Caleb couldn't forgive. It wasn't just about money. It was about control, reputation, and the message it sent to others who might think of doing the same. For Caleb, coming to Liverpool was not business. It was personal. Their base of operations was hidden behind a facade of legitimacy, a derelict ship repair warehouse at the edge of the docklands. Inside, it became a war room. Maps covered the walls, dotted with red markings for Doyle's properties, bars, and routes. Miles handled the local connections, paying off dock workers, informants, and a few key figures in law enforcement. Victor trained a small crew of loyal men who had come from New Jersey, all of them veterans of street wars. Everything was calculated, every step designed to send a message. The Americans were not here to negotiate. The locals didn't know what to make of them. The Americans didn't drink in the usual bars or show off their wealth. They stayed quiet, focused, waiting for the right moment to strike. Caleb often stood on the rooftop of the warehouse at night, staring across the city lights reflecting in the water. To him, Liverpool was a chessboard, and every gang, every street dealer, every police contact was a piece to be moved or sacrificed. Soon, people started to vanish. Small-time dealers, transport middlemen, corrupt dock clerks. Nothing dramatic, nothing public, just disappearances that unsettled the streets. It was the kind of silence that said something big was coming. The city had seen crime before, but not like this. The Americans had arrived, and Liverpool didn't yet know it was standing on the edge of a firestorm. Before the Americans set foot in Liverpool, the Underworld already had a king, Reggie Doyle. He had ruled the docks for nearly 2 decades, his power built on a mix of fear, loyalty, and manipulation. Reggie wasn't just another street gangster. He was a businessman in expensive suits who knew how to make dirty money look clean. He owned warehouses, nightclubs, and a private transport company that moved more than just cargo. For years, no one challenged him. The police were paid off, rivals disappeared, and his influence reached deep into the city council. But greed, as always, became his downfall. The deal with the Americans had been meant to elevate his empire beyond Liverpool, a partnership with Miami's infamous syndicate to import large-scale shipments directly from South America. The Americans handled the source. Reggie handled the docks. Everything ran smoothly until the day one of the largest shipments went missing. Instead of sharing profits, Reggie kept it all. He told his men the Americans had been raided by the Coast Guard and wouldn't be coming back. He ordered the bodies of 2 Miami couriers buried near the shipyard, ensuring no one would ever link the theft to him. He thought distance would protect him. He thought wrong. Caleb Duran, the man Reggie underestimated, never believed in forgiveness. The betrayal spread through Miami like a stain, and soon every contact, every courier, and every accountant connected to Liverpool vanished. Caleb studied everything about Reggie, his habits, his weaknesses, the people he trusted. He didn't rush. He moved like a patient hunter. For months, Caleb had his men quietly blend into the fabric of the city. They bought businesses, funded underground gambling rings, and slipped envelopes into the right hands. The British underworld didn't notice the slow infiltration until it was too late. The first to switch sides was a bartender at one of Reggie's clubs, a man named Leo Cavanaugh. He started feeding the Americans small details when the shipments arrived, which drivers were loyal, who handled the accounts. From there, the web expanded. A driver turned. A warehouse manager started passing photos. Even a detective in the narcotics unit began leaking case files in exchange for bribes. Caleb's crew now had eyes inside Reggie's operation. Every move Doyle made, every shipment he planned, was silently tracked. Meanwhile, Reggie believed he was untouchable. He still hosted parties in his waterfront mansion, drinking imported whiskey and laughing with his inner circle. But cracks were forming. His men began disappearing without explanation. Money transfers failed. Some shipments vanished before even reaching the docks. He blamed rivals, not realizing the enemy was already inside his empire. Miles Carter, the strategist, quietly drew up maps of the city, marking warehouses, routes, and safe houses. Each red circle was a future target. Victor Hale prepared a team for the first strike, waiting for Caleb's signal. They weren't planning to kill everyone. Not yet. They wanted to destroy Doyle piece by piece, to make him watch his world crumble before the final blow. By the time Reggie finally suspected the Americans were back, it was already too late. They had been watching him for months, and every move he made only tightened the noose around his neck. The betrayal that once made him powerful had now written his death sentence. The first strike came on a Thursday night when the air hung heavy with rain and smoke from the dockyard chimneys. The storm had rolled in from the Irish Sea, and the city's lights flickered under the wet sky. It was the perfect night for something to disappear. Reggie Doyle's largest warehouse, sitting at the edge of the Stanley Dock, was filled with crates of drugs, counterfeit cash, and weapons worth a fortune. Inside, a handful of guards played cards, unaware that they were minutes away from becoming part of Liverpool's most terrifying night. At exactly 1:45 a.m., the first explosion hit. It wasn't loud enough to wake the city, but strong enough to rip through the old timber walls. Flames leapt up, twisting and feeding on the fuel barrels stacked inside. The fire spread faster than anyone could react, swallowing the building in minutes. The guards who managed to escape ran screaming into the rain, but the night drowned their cries. By the time the fire department arrived, the warehouse had become a collapsing furnace. The air smelled of gasoline and burning wood. Reggie Doyle's empire had lost its backbone before he even realized he was under attack. Caleb Duran watched the fire from a distance, standing beside his car on the opposite side of the river. He said nothing. The reflection of the flames danced in his cold eyes as the plan moved into its next phase. The fire wasn't meant to destroy everything. It was meant to send a message, to let Liverpool's gangs know that the Americans had returned and were cleaning house. But the city didn't understand that yet. It thought the fire was an accident, just another dock mishap. That illusion wouldn't last long. Within 24 hours, 2 of Reggie's top men vanished. They were last seen leaving a club in Toxteth after midnight. 3 days later, their bodies surfaced in the canal, bruised, tied, and marked with the same burnt cigarette scar behind the ear. It was a silent signature, a reminder that this wasn't just business. It was retribution. The underworld of Liverpool began to panic. Club owners stopped opening at night. Runners and dealers started leaving town. No one spoke Reggie's name without looking over their shoulder. The Americans, though rarely seen, became ghosts that haunted every rumor. Every new body found near the water had people whispering their return. For Caleb's crew, this was only the beginning. Miles Carter had already mapped the next targets: a front company, a stash house, and an accountant's office. Victor Hale led the cleanup team, ensuring there were no witnesses left to connect the dots. They didn't need to brag or threaten anyone. Their silence spoke louder than violence itself. Reggie, meanwhile, was losing his grip. The fire had cost him money, but the fear cost him power. His men started doubting him, some even talking about switching sides. The empire he had built over 2 decades was crumbling in days. He began sleeping with armed guards outside his room, but deep down he knew it wouldn't matter. The Americans had found his weakness, pride, and they were going to burn it down piece by piece, until nothing of Reggie Doyle remained but ashes floating above the Mersey River. Caleb Duran's plan unfolded, like a chess game that only he could see the end of. Every move was silent, deliberate, and merciless. The Americans had already shown their presence with the warehouse fire and the bodies in the canal, but now it was time to dismantle Reggie Doyle's empire from the inside. Miles Carter, the strategist, operated out of a small office in an abandoned shipyard. Maps, photographs, and ledgers covered the walls, each marked with names and routes that fed Doyle's criminal machine. Every piece of information had a purpose. Every name would either turn, vanish, or die. The next phase was economic warfare. Instead of blowing up more buildings, Caleb targeted Reggie's money. His import trucks started disappearing before reaching their destinations. Fake invoices were sent to his shell companies, draining his accounts without a trace. Shipments that Reggie thought were filled with cocaine arrived packed with worthless sand. The confusion spread like a virus. His men accused each other of theft. Alliances broke, and trust inside the gang crumbled. Caleb didn't need to shoot anyone to make Reggie bleed. He was cutting off his empire as lifeblood. Meanwhile, Victor Hale moved through the streets like a shadow. He wasn't a thinker like Miles or a planner like Caleb. He was a weapon. At night, he hunted the ones who still stood loyal to Doyle: lieutenants, money collectors, and drivers who refused to flip. Bodies started turning up in alleyways, each one stripped of anything that could identify them. Rumors spread fast through the underworld. People said Victor never spoke when he killed. He just looked into a man's eyes before ending him, as if measuring how much fear he could create in silence. Among all this chaos, one person inside Reggie's circle began to break. His nephew, Finn Doyle. Ambitious and reckless, Finn had grown tired of living in his uncle's shadow. He wanted control, respect, and money of his own. The Americans saw his weakness and moved quickly. Miles made contact through a middleman, promising Finn protection and a share of the future trade if he helped them. At first, Finn hesitated, but as his uncle's empire fell apart, his loyalty shifted. Soon, Finn was feeding Caleb information from inside Reggie's home: meeting times, routes, even safe house locations. The betrayal that once came from Reggie was now returning to him tenfold. Liverpool turned into a war zone in slow motion. Cars exploded outside clubs. Shots rang out near the river. Police patrols increased, but most officers were already compromised. Some accepted bribes, others simply looked the other way. The media called it a turf war, but those on the streets knew better. It was something far colder, more organized, an invasion disguised as revenge. By the end of the week, Reggie Doyle was surrounded by enemies he couldn't see. Every night, he changed safe houses, moving with a convoy of armed guards. He no longer trusted anyone, not even his family. And still, Caleb stayed calm, never rushing the final move. The war wasn't about how many people died. It was about control. The Americans already owned Liverpool. Reggie just hadn't realized it yet. Reggie Doyle was running out of options. His once mighty network had collapsed into chaos, his men turning on each other, and his money scattered into thin air. The docks that had once bowed to his power were now ruled by fear of the unseen Americans. Caleb Duran's name wasn't spoken openly, but every criminal in Liverpool knew who was behind the destruction. Reggie was desperate for one last move to save himself. He couldn't fight a ghost, but he could set a trap. The plan was dangerous, but it was all he had left, a final gamble at Stanley Dock, the same place where his empire had first been born. Reggie spread false information through the streets, letting word slip that a new shipment was arriving from Rotterdam, one last major load of product worth millions. He made sure the right people overheard it, especially those who had been seen associating with the Americans. He wanted Caleb's crew to believe it was real and come for it. Around the warehouse, he placed armed men, snipers hidden in containers, and cars rigged with explosives. It was a death trap disguised as opportunity. Doyle himself watched from a distance, certain that this would finally end the nightmare. But Caleb had already anticipated it. He'd learned long ago that desperate men always overplay their hand. His inside man, Finn Doyle, had passed every detail of the setup to Miles Carter 2 nights earlier. The Americans prepared a counterattack so quietly that not even the police surveillance teams noticed the movement. They planned not just to survive the trap, but to erase Reggie Doyle completely. The night of the ambush, the air was cold and heavy with fog. At exactly midnight, headlights appeared at the edge of Stanley Dock, 3 black vehicles moving slowly toward the warehouse. Reggie's men, hidden in the shadows, tightened their grips on their rifles. The convoy stopped, engines idling. Minutes passed, nothing moved. Then suddenly, from the rooftops around them, explosions tore through the night. Gas lines, pre-rigged by Victor Hale earlier that evening, ignited in a chain reaction. The dockyard lit up like a burning maze. The snipers never got the chance to fire. Within moments, the entire trap collapsed inward. Doyle's men ran for cover, some caught in the fire, others shot by unseen gunmen. The Americans had surrounded them, attacking from every direction with precision and speed. By the time the smoke began to settle, Reggie's entire force had been wiped out. His convoy was found destroyed, his cars burning in a pool of oil and seawater. Reggie tried to escape through the side tunnels near the docks, but Victor found him before dawn. The city woke to rumors of gunfire and explosions echoing across the river, but by morning, the police found only wreckage and silence. Reggie Doyle's body was discovered face down in the cold water, a bullet through his chest and the same small cigarette burned behind his ear, the mark that had haunted Liverpool for weeks. By sunrise, the American crew was gone. No witnesses, no trace, no bodies left behind, except Doyle's. The dock was still smoking, its ashes carried by the wind. What was once Reggie's empire now belonged to ghosts. Caleb Duran had won without ever needing to say a word.